It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Of course not.
Should police investigate Keir Starmer amid claims that he broke lockdown rules so an actress and voice coach could help him out? Surely she's not actually a key worker. Also,
UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out.
Trump seems open to not whacking a load of tariffs on Britain. So, what does Starmer do? He goes and cozies up to the EU, naturally. Meanwhile, back in America,
We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy.
Mexico has caved into Trump and agrees to send 10,000 of their own troops to police their own border. Plus,
Bit way heavy though.
No, don't even think about it.
Tony Martin, the farmer who killed a burglar, has passed away. On my panel tonight, we've got former Tory party chairman Sir J. Berry, journalist Carol Malone and political commentator Andy Twelves. And just when you thought Hollywood celebs couldn't get any weirder...
Just don't take it.
And can you guess what happened next when two giant hogs found their way into this man's garden? Oof, yeah, OK. All that and much more. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Keir Starmer looks weaker than a cup of very milky tea. Next.
Very good evening to you. Our top stories. The Prime Minister says his thoughts are with the family of a 15-year-old boy who died after he was stabbed at a school in Sheffield earlier. The victim was airlifted to hospital after the incident at All Saints Catholic High School just after midday. He died a short time later. South Yorkshire Police have confirmed a 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in custody. Sir Keir Starmer says his heart goes out to the victim's family.
The terrible stabbing in Sheffield is one where I think the whole country would want to reach out to the family, to the friends, to the school, the entire community. A young boy has gone to school and hasn't returned home, and so my first thoughts as Prime Minister and as a father are with the family.
Well, the Prime Minister was speaking in Brussels ahead of a dinner with EU leaders where he will attempt to reset relations with the bloc. Sir Keir says the UK won't be forced to choose between the US and the EU should a trade war develop, after Donald Trump confirmed his plans to hit Europe with tariffs. Well, earlier the Prime Minister held talks with the NATO boss Mark Rutte, with defence and security cooperation a key part of a trip which has been described as a tightrope act as he attempts to forge closer ties with the EU without angering the US President. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has confirmed the US will delay imposing tariffs on Mexico for a month after agreeing a border deal with President Claudia Sheinbaum. Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico yesterday and 10% for China. It's all due to begin tomorrow, but he's announced a temporary reprieve after Mexico agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border to stem the flow of illegal drugs. Well, global markets slumped earlier following Trump's announcements and his stated intention to impose tariffs on the EU, but he has hinted that he may not hit the UK with a similar sanction. Finally, a 14-year-old girl who stabbed two teachers and a pupil has been found guilty of attempted murder. The jury saw CCTV footage showing the pupil in the school hall earlier in the day, where she appeared to stab the knife she would later use in the attack into the floor. Now, the girl, who can't be named for legal reasons, is then seen attacking assistant head teacher Fiona Elias and her colleague Liz Hopkins. They, along with a pupil, were hospitalised after the attack at Amman Valley School in Carmarthenshire last April. The defendant is due to be sentenced on the 28th of April. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in about an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome along. Donald Trump has got the Mexicans to stop other Mexicans breaking into America. Keir Starmer is less useful than a chocolate fireguard when it comes to protecting our border, though. Trump threatened tariffs on Mexico. And what happened? Well, immediately, Mexico promised to station 10,000 soldiers specifically designed to stop the flow of the deadly drug fentanyl into America, as well as illegal immigrants. As a result, he's now suspended tariffs on Mexico. Trump also tried it on with Colombia, didn't he, who refused to accept illegal immigrants.
Probably read about Colombia 2 days ago. They said, no, we're not taking them. I said, we're going to take them. You're going to take them. You're going to like it, too.
Well, he threatened tariffs, and then their president offered his own private jet to come and get them. He then tried it on with Panama.
The Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
And what happened yesterday? Well, US naval ships have been given free passage through the Panama Canal. They are also going to cool their relationship with China. Absolute result, isn't it? President Trump presented Prime Minister Keir Starmer with an open goal today. All Starmer had to do was tap the ball into the empty net, and everything would have been absolutely fine.
Will definitely happen with the European Union, I can tell you that, because they've really taken advantage of us. They don't take our cars, they don't take our farm products, they take almost nothing, and we take everything from them. European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity.
There you have it. Clear as day. Trump prefers Britain to the EU. He can do better business with us than the EU. He wants to do better business with us than the EU. And actually, he's been of that view ever since the day after the Brexit vote.
They want to take their country back. They want to have independence in a sense. And you see it with Europe, all over Europe. You're going to have more than just, in my opinion, more than just what happened last night. The UK has been such a great ally for so long. They'll always be at the front of the line. They've been amazing allies in good times and in bad times.
All right, so with that in mind, what did Keir Starmer do in his infinite wisdom? Well, he went off to Brussels to meet with a load of EU bigwigs so people like Emmanuel Macron can tell him how Brexit has been a complete disaster. So despite the fact that Starmer's cabinet called Trump things like a neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating, KKK-aligned fascist and goodness knows what else, Trump is willing to overlook all of that and, by the sounds of it, treat us better than most nations. What does Starmer do? Goes to the EU with his begging bowl out, negotiating from a position of unbelievable weakness because they all know he's said stuff like this.
Already voted, I think, 3 times as a party for a second referendum with a 3-line whip behind it.
And so I can tell you today, an incoming Labour government will legislate for a referendum immediately on taking power and hold that referendum within 6 months. Labour must support all options remaining on the table, including campaigning for a public vote. That was our commitment.
We would call for a general election if the deal didn't get through, but that if that didn't happen, the option of a public vote ought to be available.
Yeah, so they've got him over a barrel, haven't they? The EU leaders even invited Starmer to a leaders' summit in the same building where Ted Heath signed away our sovereignty in 1972. They are taking the absolute mickey. But that's the difference, isn't it, between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump? Starmer's a beta male and Trump's an alpha. Half the time, Keir Starmer doesn't even know what a male is.
With, you know...
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just... I just...
A woman can have a penis.
I don't think that discussing this issue in this way helps anyone in the long run.
Is it Trump?
Yeah, it's Keir Starmer's beta Britain and Trump's alpha America. Trump isn't letting anyone push him around and he's getting results. Tomorrow, our Prime Minister is going to metaphorically sit on Emmanuel Macron's little knee and grovel to EU officials over the result of the largest democratic vote in modern British history. So thoughts from my panel this evening, journalist and broadcaster Carol Malone, we've got trade unionist Andy Twelves, former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, I mean, look, we've got that compare and contrast with the way that Trump is behaving, even left the door wide open to Keir Starmer today, and Keir Starmer has instead decided to go and grovel to a bunch of people who don't even like him.
Yeah, I mean, why we would expect Starmer to be like him is beyond me. You know, the man is gutless. He has no courage. You know, he's got jelly where his spine should be, and he's never going to do anything like this. And let's not forget, in terms of, you know, Starmer's done this to prevent, you know, immigration as well. And just, we have a guy who said, a couple of years ago, he said our immigration laws were racist. This is a man who doesn't want to tackle immigration. It's the biggest single issue that affects the people of this country, and he's putting his head in the sand, and he doesn't want to deal with it, and he can't. And, you know, and because of that, he's now trying to revoke all the laws that would stop anybody coming here. So he's trying to, remember, the Tories put in place the law that said it was going to be people who came here illegally could never be UK citizens. Now they're going to repeal that law. They're going to repeal the law that says that if you say you're under 18, which a lot of immigrants do because they get sent to a school and they get immediate housing as opposed to sent to various centres. So a lot of people are saying the Tories were put forward a law that said if you won't submit to age tests, you will be considered an adult, whatever. Labour are repealing that. So they're taking away every single deterrent we have to stop people coming in. And yet you still have Starmer saying, I'm going to smash the gangs. This is total capitulation to illegal immigrants and to smugglers.
Well, what Trump has done is threatened tariffs, hasn't he, on the likes of Mexico. Mexico's going to put 10,000 armed troops to stop the flow of drugs and, indeed, criminals and people into America. Why can't we try to do something similar with France? We've given them 500 million quid, and we revealed a story exclusively on the show last week that France had 12 new CCTV cameras on some of the Calais beaches. They're not even turned them on until a couple of months ago, and it turns out only 3 of them work.
Yeah. Look, you think what we're seeing from Trump here is what you call real global leadership. He is using the undoubted muscle of America to get what is best for America. He doesn't care about Europe. He doesn't care about Mexico. He cares about America. Well, guess what? They're the people who voted for him. So they're the people he should care about. I just wonder, though, he's been really successful with Mexico and Colombia. How successful is he going to be with less dependent economies? So Mexico and Colombia trade over 90% of their traders with the United States of America. Not so Europe. Europe is not quite as reliant by a very long way. What we've seen in Canada, although I understand there's been a good call between him and Justin Trudeau this evening, warm words exchanged, there's seen a surge in Canadian nationalism. This has not had the effect that he thought it would, with people saying we must join with America. It's strengthened Canadian nationalism. It may have a similar effect in Europe. He may just have overreached on these tariffs with Europe, but it's clear to me where Britain should be. Britain should not be taking sides in this. We should be a fair referee, if you like, in our, stand by our belief in free trade around the globe, but we should be a referee. And frankly, Starmer going cap in hand to the EU, in many ways trying to reverse lots of the benefits of Brexit, is not where a Prime Minister who believed in Britain should be today.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, Andy. I mean, there are a lot of rumours flying around at the moment about exactly what our relationship with Europe is going to look like going forward with Keir Starmer. A big fear of it is that we're going to end up back in something like a customs union. Well, I suspect they would find a way of not calling it that, but something along those lines. When we've got Trump there saying that we now, because of Brexit, can be a bit more nimble, why would Keir Starmer want to do that, do you think?
Well, I think it's not odd that, he's still new to the job. He's been Prime Minister for, 6-7 months now? Like, in the big scheme of things, that's not a very long time.
He's made a lot of bloody mistakes.
It's not an Jake's government managed, 2 weeks at Liz Truss?
Do you know what? At least it took us 14 years. Keir Starmer's managed to make a mess of the whole bloody lot in 7 months.
I think austerity measures came in pretty early on, and they were pretty devastating. But this is besides the point. Keir Starmer's still reasonably new to the Prime Minister's job. It's not unexpected that he is doing all of the introductory meetings in Europe. He's revisiting the relationships. It's a completely new government.
He's been out of this country more than he's been in it. We have problems here. Why is he going?
I think the Labour Party wants.
You said that the dinghies and illegal migration is one of the biggest things that affect the British people. They're coming from France. Obviously, we have to go to France to fix that. We have to work with the French government.
No, we don't, because all across Europe, they're bringing in laws, and was announced that they're bringing in laws that will help mass deportations of illegal immigrants.
Correct.
We're not doing that here. We're doing the total opposite.
But we do have to work with the French government.
We are effectively decriminalising.
It doesn't matter what Trump's position on the EU is. We do have to work with France and the EU on stopping illegal migrants.
No, but you're wrong.
That's the point.
That is the typical defeat.
Going to Europe and then go, he's not helping.
Yes, we can, because he has no intention of actually... He has no intention of mass deporting people. He wants to do the opposite. He wants to take away every deterrent we have.
But look, that is the typical. That's what people hate in this country. We've got Calamity Keir, who wants to go away cap in hand and beg the French to help us, and Donald Trump saying to the Mexicans they've got a very similar problem. How many people? Exactly. Hundreds came over last week on small boats. It's got a very similar problem in Mexico, obviously on a much bigger scale. It's a much bigger country. And he just says, if you don't help us sort this out, we're going to whack you. We're going to whack you with tariffs. We're going to shut your economy down.
What could we do to the French economy? What could we do to the European bloc?
Do you know what?
Genuinely,
do you know what? They run a massive trade surplus with us. We could say we're a net importer. We could say, do you know what? We'll put a tariff on European goods, and if you won't sell us stuff, you won't sell us stuff. We've got a friend on the other side of the Atlantic.
Much smaller than that. Let me just say, much smaller than that is we could stop the multi-millions we're paying every year to have French coppers smoking on the beach, watching people get onto the boats. That's what we could stop.
So what could our stick be with the EU then? So Trump's got the whopping great big stick of American might and American capitalism and all of that stuff. So you're saying that
we're still arguably the fifth. Well, we're either the fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world. It goes up and down a bit. We've got all of the fishing rights, which we know the European Union is absolutely desperate to get back. And from the briefing over the weekend, it appears that Keir Starmer is going to give those back to Europe, if the briefing come out of Number 10 is correct, in exchange for under 30-year-olds being able to freely travel in Europe. Hardly seems like a good deal to me. So we should turn around to the EU, with who the EU runs a massive surplus with us. We should turn around to the EU and say, do you know what? Unless you stop these migrants, we'll keep our fishing rights. We'll look at putting tariffs on goods imported from the EU. You didn't let me finish, but actually we've got a willing partner in America.
You did interrupt me.
Yeah, we've got a willing partner. OK, well, 1-0. But we've got a willing partner in America who will export to Britain, and actually that's where we should be looking. Europe is a part of the world that actually the economy is in trouble and shrinking. The rest of the world is growing. You know, there's so much we could do. You just have to believe in Britain, and Keir Starmer does not believe in Britain.
Even if we had clout, the kind of clout you're talking about, he's never going to use it. He's not built like that. He's not a leader.
Correct. Is that not a problem for you, Andy, that you think that actually Keir Starmer, if he believed in Britain more in the way that Trump unashamedly believes in America, that maybe we could be using a bit more stick with it, either being specifically with the French or with the EU as a whole? I mean, bear in mind that it does look like tomorrow he's going to willingly walk into the same building that he signed our
I mean, there are only so many buildings in Europe. You know, there are only so many.
There are a few.
There are only so many buildings in the European Union government. There are only so many government buildings. I mean, you know, he also lives in the same house that Churchill lived in. Like, you can make these silly comparisons. It's a silly bit of rhetoric, that is.
All right.
But realistically, we don't have the same amount of clout that Trump does. No. We're not America. We are not.
Fair enough. All right, OK. Well, hey, look, we'll find out, won't we? We're going to have a lot to go at tomorrow as well, probably. But we are giving you 2 chances now.
Huge.
That's right. 2 chances to win our latest Great British giveaway. And we have 2 amazing bundles to be won. Here's all the details that you need.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right. You could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, good luck, everybody. Still to come. As Kemi Badenoch meets with donors, many think that she hasn't done enough to fix the Tory party. The problem that the Tories have been forced to deny now is that they're frankly out of money and that they're having a load of crisis meetings. But up next, more on the US's trade war with the rest of the world. Do President Trump's comments on the EU and the UK prove that actually Brexit is a success? I'll be joined by Republicans Overseas Chairman Greg Swenson and the trade industry expert as well to battle this out. This is Patrick Christys tonight. We are only on GB News.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym after this. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're going to win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and they're barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Patrick Christys. Tonight we are only on GB News and it's time now for the head-to-head. Mexico, Canada, China, no one is safe from Trump's tariffs. And now the US president has set his sights on the EU and the UK. Here's a little reminder for you.
UK is out of line, but I'm sure I think that one can be worked out.
Would he have teased such a concession for us if Brexit hadn't happened? It positioned us right at the front of the line for trade deals with America. Here's a reminder again of what Trump said the day after the referendum results in 2016.
The UK has been such a great ally for so long. They'll always be at the front of the line.
Oh, great. So tonight I'm asking, do Trump's remarks about the EU and the UK show that Brexit has indeed been a success? Joining me now is the Director General at the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. It's Marco Forgione, and the Chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swanson. Thank you very, very much. Greg, I'll start with you. Do you think that this shows that actually Brexit can be a success? We're still part of the EU. We'd be lumped in with them, wouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the UK is very different from the EU in many respects. First of all, unlike the big countries in the EU, the big economies, Germany and France, who are spending well below their commitment to defence, well below the 2% target, and yet the UK is at 2.5%. It might be inadequate in some ways, but they're still hitting the 2.5%, well over 2%. There isn't a big trade surplus. I mean, a slight surplus for the UK, but it's not enormous. The EU trade surplus with the US is $230 billion. So that's not going to annoy President Trump as much as, or at least that the EU will be much more annoying to him. And then, of course, there's no border issue with the UK. They're not letting fentanyl and illegal migrants come in like Canada and Mexico. So I know that's outside of the EU conversation, but I think it is, those first 2 points are really relevant with the way that the president and the administration looks at the UK versus the EU.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump does have a soft spot for Britain, not least the royal family, and of course he's got business interests here and some kind of family history, and that does set us apart between the European Union and that. We're also now no longer not officially a part of the EU, so surely this has been a benefit for us. Do you think Brexit Britain could benefit significantly from Trump now?
Well, there's a huge opportunity, and it's not just about trade, although that's the tool that's being used, the threat of tariffs. This is about Trump unpicking the administrative state. He's definitely looking to establish a new global system of operation, and trade is a part of that. But it's being used, as we've seen with Canada and Mexico, to deal with the border issues. So these are geopolitical issues that are being addressed, and it's a radical agenda, and the UK, as you've identified now as being outside of the EU, has the opportunity to benefit from dealing with the friction that still exists with trade with the EU, and also establishing a much closer trading relationship with the US.
So you think that actually Brexit Britain could be a benefit here?
I think there's a real opportunity now if the Prime Minister and the government play it right, whereby we address the friction that exists with trade with the EU and secure a much better trading relationship with what is going to be a dynamic and growing US economy.
Right, OK, well, there we go. It's not really a head-to-head, this, is it? It does appear like you both actually agree and get on, so fantastic. I mean, what should we do now with Trump? Because Keir Starmer is now over in the EU, isn't he? Or certainly will be sooner. Supposedly he's going to take kicking for them. I mean, the headline this morning was that Emmanuel Macron said was going to sit him down and tell him the reason you're here is because Brexit hasn't worked. Well, why doesn't Keir Starmer turn around and say, actually, screw you, I don't need to be here anymore because I'm going to do whatever Trump wants?
Well, I'm not sure that Keir Starmer, really believes in anything, but also he doesn't necessarily believe that Brexit was a great success. And I think the failures of Brexit, most obviously, are the fact that the Tory government did not embrace deregulation and tax reform, all the things that a supply-sider would do. And so it was in many ways a missed opportunity, but he's kind of stuck with it. And I think he's got to balance two acts right now. He's got to work with both. He's got to work with the EU and the US. And this goes back to that, those moments during the Brexit campaign when Barack Obama said you'll be at the, in the back of the queue. That didn't sit well with conservatives. And then, of course, as you saw in the clip that you played earlier, President Trump has always been a fan of the UK and always been a fan of Brexit as well. We didn't get that with the Biden years. Biden was very hostile to the UK.
Yeah.
He was very, pro-EU, pro-Ireland. This is a great, as Marco said, a great opportunity for Keir Starmer to do the right thing.
But will he miss this open goal? Because Keir Starmer, the Attorney General, who none of us voted for, was telling everyone in the European Union that Britain will never deviate from the ECHR. He said that at the end of last week. I think it was Thursday that I was on talking about that. He is, I think, he's Davos, not Westminster, isn't he, Keir Starmer? He's a massive fan of international law. So if his natural default response is to try to go and suck up to the European Union, when you can argue the open goal is Trump and it's there. So what's he going to do?
Well, the EU is our largest trading bloc, and the reality is that since we exited, trade between UK business and the EU has fallen off a cliff. That's had a dramatic impact on the UK economy and on communities and businesses in the UK. So getting that right is really important, addressing that ongoing friction and building a better relationship with the EU. But it's not either or. We can do that, and I think there are opportunities to do that, But the point you're making, which is really valid, we have got to very actively engage with President Trump and the new administration and make sure that the UK is positioned.
That's part of our massive leverage now. I mean, we mentioned earlier about fishing rights, which, as far as we can understand, and we'll wait to see what happens because nothing has been signed yet, but all the noises suggest that Keir Starmer was willing to give away more of our fishing rights in return for 30-year-olds being able to travel more freely around the bloc, which, as far as I can tell, is both things that the EU want. So, you know, that's not exactly great business, is it? So I don't quite understand why he's doing that. This is another leverage, isn't it? Emmanuel Macron sits him down tomorrow, supposedly, and says to him, Brexit's been an absolute disaster, that's why you're here. Why doesn't he just play him the clip of Trump there, saying that he prefers us, and go, well, if you give us a rubbish deal, I'm just going to run straight into the arms of him?
I think you have to also understand that there are huge pressures internally within the EU, and the power base that Macron had and that Germany has had since the formation of the EU isn't what it was. And you're looking now at new nations. You look at Meloni in Italy, who is taking a much stronger active role in leading in the EU, and she is very close to President Trump. You know, she was at the inauguration. She's been down to Mar-a-Lago. I think, as I've said, this is a restructuring of the global system, and Trump is implementing that and will be using tariffs as a tool to exert his will, not just on individual nations, but on trading blocs.
If we highlighted our differences now with the European Union more than we seem desperate to acknowledge our similarities, would that not put us with this new world order that we're talking about here, with this new axis of nations?
Absolutely. I mean, you're seeing the voter rejection of the leftist, you know, big bureaucracy, the multilateral institutions like the EU, for that matter. But, you know, the voters are pushing against. You're going to see it in Germany in the elections in a few months. They've rejected the coalition. You're seeing the rumblings in France. You already saw it in Italy, as Marco pointed out, with Meloni. The movement is real, and the more you can adapt the Trump playbook, the more you can adapt the American model, the better. The UK voters want that. Yeah. And I think that Starmer would be wise to pay attention to the polls.
I think we also want our leaders to stop apologising for things that I don't think they need to. Well, certainly in this case, one of the largest expressions of democracy that we've ever seen. You can argue with the rights and wrongs of it, obviously. But I think the idea that Keir Starmer has been negotiating from a position of weakness for a period of time, going cap in hand to the European Union, almost apologetically, really, I think, you know, that has to end now. Yeah. That just has to end, I think, because especially because of what's been going on in Trump's America, and not least as well, of course, because of where he is in the polls. But look, chaps, thank you very much. We could have spoken about this for a lot longer, but we are out of time, I'm afraid. Thanks, so thank you. Much appreciated. Loads more coming your way, including a little bit of this.
Of course not.
Well, should Keir Starmer be getting a knock on the door from police amid claims that he broke lockdown rules so an actress and voice coach could help him out? Surely she wasn't a key worker. But up next, Kemi Badenoch has met with donors this evening, or I think last night, actually. Many think that she hasn't done enough. Is it true that the Tories are actually in quite a lot of financial trouble? Stay tuned.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, there's plenty of fine weather around as higher pressure becomes established, but unsettled in parts of Greece. So across the Canaries, largely dry on Tuesday. Across Gibraltar, perhaps just seeing some spells of rain or showers. Largely dry across parts of Italy as well with sunshine, but across Greece, we have got an area of low pressure, bringing some showers, perhaps quite heavy at times. But looking ahead across Wednesday and Thursday, plenty of settled weather and feeling pleasant too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night. Quite murky across the southeast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle is possible and generally a bit milder than last night. Could dip down to the low single digits with some clearer skies in the east, but many places will start Tuesday quite a bit above freezing. But we will start with rain across central Scotland, West Wales. Much of England, though, will still be dry at this stage. It's quite grey and murky across East Anglia and the southeast. There's that rain, a soggy start for a good part of Wales. Northwest England, southern Scotland, the rain edging away from Glasgow through the morning rush hour. In fact, much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, and eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. So, the Conservative Party is apparently fighting to stem the loss of high-value donors to Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Sources say that pledges exceeding £1 million have already come in from business leaders backing reform, which is sparking concern within Conservative HQ. Kemi Badenoch meets with donors in London. Many worry that she hasn't done enough to win them back. Basically, the story is that the Tories might be about to go bust. Apparently, some of their senior MPs aren't allowed to hire staff, actually, anymore, unless it comes out of their own budget, and they might be about to have to move out of CCHQ. So why are the Tories in so much trouble? Joining me now is former Conservative Deputy Chairman Jonathan Gullis. Jonathan, thank you very much. Great to see you again, mate. Look, sorry to talk to you about this, but of course it does appear to be happening. The Tories are skint now, are they?
Well, look, I never saw the finances in my time as a Member of Parliament and Deputy Chairman, but I'm not shocked by the fact that when you go into opposition after 14 years, it's always going to be difficult. I think any party faces that financial reality. But I think it does come to a wider point about discussing what CCHQ is there for. And I think Kemi Badenoch is reported of saying that their job is simply to make sure we get the fundraising in, to ultimately support the campaigning activities of members of parliament, candidates and councillors across the country, because ultimately we have an almighty task on our hands. And as I've said to you before, Patrick, it might be a task that we try and fulfil, but ultimately still end up failing because of the distrust that the British public have towards us. But it's a fight that we must be willing to have.
Well, and those polls that have emerged, I'm sure you've seen it, but I'll bring it up anyway. So last week there were a couple of polls that put Reform at the top of the tree, and today there was another one, actually, which was commissioned by Sky News, which I imagine must have smarted a little bit for people at Sky News. But it's YouGov, Westminster voting intention, Reform UK up at 25, Labour at 24, the Tories at 21, Lib Dems at 14, Greens at 9, and it doesn't really matter about the rest, does it? So, Jonathan, just on that, why if you were a donor, Why do you think you'd be going to the Tories now when it appears like maybe all the momentum is with Reform?
If I was reminding donors why they should stick with us, it's because ultimately, if we look at what history shows you, it takes time when you're in opposition after 14 years of government. We saw Labour took 14 years to come back. We saw the Conservatives obviously taking 13 years after the Blair year, during the Blair and Brown years. So it does take time. Secondly, I think there was always going to be an ultimate crossover with Reform. Ultimately, Reform are benefiting from not being Labour nor being Conservative. And Kemi Badenoch's only been in the job a couple of months. And ultimately, it's going to take time for her to come up with policy, to try and show that we are opposition that is able to hold this government to account, and then actually try and convince the British public to give us another shot. Now, as I say, Patrick, and I keep reiterating this because I don't think enough Conservative parliamentarians are aware of the reality they're facing. We can do all this, and the public might well and truly have already made their mind up about the Conservative Party not willing to give us another look. I think 2026 is still going to be challenging. We're going to see Reform surge in Wales. They'll do well in Scotland. They'll gain even more councillors. They may already have the mayor in Andrea Jenkins. And I think if Conservative parliamentarians in particular are not mentally prepared for that reality, panic will ensue. We'll end up infighting. Kemi will be the one they point the finger at. And ultimately, it will just be a further gift to Reform, who ultimately we obviously have to try and somehow see off, which, as I say, may not be as easily possible. And it's obviously hard as well, because there's lots of Conservatives like myself who don't disagree with a large amount of the Reform agenda.
Yeah, I mean, you must be hearing from Conservatives that they are presumably saying, aren't they, to you, that they can't get special advisors. They're being told not to hire it unless they put it out of their own salary. So that is a thing that's happening, is it?
I think you've seen on W4MP, work for an MP website jobs, there's a couple advertised there where, yes, shadow cabinet ministers are advertising right now for policy specialists in their portfolio briefs. That is something that, is an ultimate challenge again for the Conservative Party to build up, but I'd rather see Conservative Party funds being used to fight these county council elections this May and prepare for the elections next year than paying for special advisors who, you won't be shocked to know that there's some very good ones out there, but they cost a hell of a lot of money, and the ones I suspect we're able to get at the moment will have just come fresh out of university, and they may know all the theory in the world, but living in the reality on the ground in places like Stoke-on-Trent is very different to what the textbooks in an Uxbridge University teaches you.
Yeah, and do you think it would be a visible sign of defeat if the Conservatives have to move out of CCHQ or Matthew Parker Street after 11 years? Do you think there's very few ways I can imagine dressing that up? Because if you did have the money, presumably you would just stay there, wouldn't you?
Well, look, I'm not emotional about it, actually. What I'd rather do is the Conservative Party took up a high street shop on every town and city across our country and make that be a little HQ for every little local community, constituency, region, where we can ultimately have a consistent presence on the high street. We'll have able to have campaign training and materials delivered there. We'll be able to obviously bring together Conservative Party members from across those local areas. I think that'd be a much better use of funds so we can actually get genuine talent from across our country rather than relying on everyone having to fork out on a train's fare down to London.
If it goes on like this, do you think Kemi Badenoch takes you into the next election?
I hope Kemi Badenoch is given the time. I hope Conservative MPs don't panic, because if they do, then I think the consistent narrative about us infighting and looking inward will only continue, which, as I say, will just be a further gift to Reform, but also a gift to Labour, who are looking to, both ways towards us and Reform at the moment. And so patience is going to be needed. Reality is, look at the Liberal Democrats. It took them 8 to 9 years after the tuition fees fiasco for them to regain trust. It could well take us that long. It may be a case that we are doomed to fail. I hope that isn't the case, because we are the oldest and most successful political party in the world. But again, we've got to come up with policies that are credible, that are deliverable, that are believable, and chime with true centre-right Conservative values. And that means, as you know, Patrick, being tough on immigration, both legal and illegal, which we're going to have to gain credibility back on, but also the net zero madness, talking about drill, baby, drill in the North Sea is what we should be saying, and making sure that we allow ceramics manufacturers, steel manufacturing to thrive in this country. And at the moment, we're allowing Reform UK to own that space too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Jonathan, look, hey, although Kemi Badenoch has denied having crisis talks, I think there is a case to say they should be having something that you could maybe loosely call a crisis talk at the moment and just get it sorted out. But Jonathan, thank you very much, mate. All the very best. You take care. Jonathan Gullis, the former Conservative Deputy Chairman. Coming up, OK, so should Sir Keir Starmer be investigated by police amid claims that he may have broken lockdown rules so that an actress and a voice coach could nip round to his on Christmas Eve and apparently help him out a little bit. Surely she's not a key worker. But next, though, Tony Martin. Is he a murderer or just a man defending his property? We discussed that with journalistic firebrand Calvin McKenzie. If someone breaks into your house, should you have the right to kill them? Stay tuned.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually, if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say, 4 weeks before surgery, you're 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. So Tony Martin, the Norfolk farmer who shot and killed a burglar at his home in 1999, has now died at the age of 69. Martin was jailed for murder after killing 16-year-old Fred Barras, but his conviction was later reduced to manslaughter due to so-called mental health issues. He was released in 2003. Martin's actions sparked some public debate on self-defence, basically whether or not if someone breaks into your own home, you should have the right to kill them.
The fact that this boy died, does that weigh heavy?
He wasn't a boy, he was a young man.
Does it weigh heavy, though?
No, don't even think about it. I obviously, basically, I sympathise for the mother saying, well, I only had one boy and now he's dead. But it's no good blaming me. When I was his age, I lived at Redmoor with my grandparents. Didn't go around breaking in bloody houses 60 miles down the road.
I mean, there is that, isn't there? Well, joining us now is the former editor of The Sun, Calvin McKenzie. Calvin, thank you very much. So what's your view on the Tony Martin story, and do you think that actually if someone breaks into your home, you should be allowed to kill them?
Well, first of all, let's get the context of this guy. So this young man, he was a gypsy. He was a criminal. He had a number of previous convictions. What he didn't know, and where his luck ran out, was that Tony Martin's house had been broken into 10 times before. And Tony Martin kept a loaded shotgun under his desk, under his bed. So when he heard all this rustling going on, the guy and his friend who was with him, right, turned tail and fled, and he shot them, right? And shot and killed this guy. Now, what happened at that time, and it would happen again today, but I suspect under social media would happen even bigger today than then, that there was a massive gulf between what the public thought of this, i.e. a criminal breaking into your house, creating mayhem, stealing, wrecking your life, possibly even abusing you, right? And the judicial authorities. So you were murdered. So he was murdered in the first. He was charged with murder. That was then commuted. He still got 5 years. He still had to do 3 years. And the reason for that was that the judicial authorities wouldn't let him out unless he apologized. He refused to apologize, so he did 3 years out of 5. I think even today that he would be considered, as he was then, a hero for those who are sick and tired of criminals getting virtually no sentences for carrying out the most heinous crimes.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, like you said, his house has been broken into 10 times. I mean, do you not think they say, you know, every Englishman's home is his castle or something like that? But what you have to be allowed to defend. You're vulnerable. It's night time. You know, you're there on your own. Well, surely you have to have the right to use lethal force if someone breaks in.
Right, and that's where the issue comes, because the prosecuting authorities claimed that because he was shot in the back, it was premeditated, i.e. Tony Martin should have let him go. But that's surely up to every individual. Yeah. I might let him go, you might let him go. Tony Martin didn't want to let him go. And the judicial authorities said, in that case, it's murder. It was never, ever murder. And that's where you get a breakdown between the public and the law. And in this case, the law had to buckle because of this strength of feeling within the country. Now, Tony Martin was a difficult kind of character in his own right. I salute him for not apologising for this particular shooting. I just wonder how many people have had their lives ruined by burglars and the like, or even being beaten up in the street, one punch outside a pub, and yet these people seem to be able to walk away directly. They claim some obscure mental issue or that their mother left them when they were 3 years old. I am sick of it. And to me, Tony Martin represents, for the first time in my lifetime, an ordinary person standing up on behalf of the public. Yeah. I felt a surge, and I felt, anyway, look, he died, he was 80 years old, and he had a life, but that life actually had a shadow over it ever since that issue.
Well, it did, but he does also say here he actually was surrounded by close friends when he died, apparently as well. So that does say quite a bit about the general perception, really, of him, which is that he still had some friends. But that point that he made there when he was asked about, do you feel sorry for the fact that this lad died? Basically, you killed someone. I thought he said, he feels relatively sorry for his mother. It's the only son he had, and I think anyone would do that. But he does then follow that up by making the point that, well, unfortunately for her son, he did break into my house in the dead of night, and that does tend to open yourself up to getting shot in the back, especially if you break into a farmhouse. That might not happen if you're breaking into a house in Cheshire, or it might happen if you're breaking into a house in Weybridge, but if you're breaking into a farmhouse, you have to understand the fact that that bloke in there might have a gun.
And also the fact that they come down from, this was a house in Wisbech. The house was in Newark, as he points out, was 60 miles away. They were going out thieving. This is what they wanted to do. They were going to cause a tremendous amount of pain to somebody in somebody's house. And as it was, for the first time, the pain was reciprocated. It was them that suffered the pain. So I personally, I do not drop a tear. Drop a tear for the family, but I don't drop a tear for the victim, I must be honest.
Do you think, just to round this off, Calvin, do you think in general that our legal system is too weighted towards the offender? We have seen cases where burglars who haven't died but have tried to escape a property and fallen onto some railings or something have ended up genuinely trying to sue the owner of that property. Does it seem as though actually the justice system is weighted towards the people who offend and not the victims of that crime?
Well, when you look at who becomes Crown prosecutors, right? if you look at Starmer today and look at the kind of people he puts in as Attorney General, who is now trying to run the company as though it's a run the country as though it's a law firm, then you get a fairly good idea of the kind of justice which ordinary people are like to have meted out. The idea he faced a murder charge, right, and was sentenced to life in prison was a disgrace to the judicial system and to everybody involved in trying to prosecute him.
Yeah, Calvin, look, hey, thank you very much. It is always much appreciated having you on the show. It's Calvin Mackenzie there, who's the former editor of The Sun. Now, I have got a heck of a lot coming your way in the next hour. A 14-year-old girl, I'll just say that again, a 14-year-old girl has been found guilty of attempting to murder 2 teachers and a pupil whilst at school. And another teenager today has been detained after allegedly stabbing a 15-year-old boy to death. Is it time now that we had metal detectors at every single school? What's going on there? But next, should Sir Keir Starmer get a knock on the door from police amid claims that he broke lockdown rules so that an actress and a voice coach could help him out? Well, not only was that surely not in the rules, surely she wasn't a key worker. And I'm going to be taking a long, hard look at it, because the downside for Sir Keir Starmer is if Boris Johnson would have done this, he'd be calling for him to get nicked, wouldn't he? Stay tuned.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night. Quite murky across the southeast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle is possible. And generally a bit milder than last night. Could dip down to the low single digits with some clearer skies in the east, but many places will start Tuesday quite a bit above freezing. But we will start with rain across central Scotland, West Wales. Much of England, though, will still be dry at this stage. It's quite grey and murky across East Anglia and the southeast. There's that rain, a soggy start for a good part of Wales. Northwest England, southern Scotland, the rain edging away from Glasgow through the morning rush hour. In fact, much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, and eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Of course not.
Should police investigate Sir Keir Starmer amid claims that he broke lockdown rules so an actress and voice coach could help him out? Surely she wasn't a key worker, and we all know how much he loved the rules.
Easing the restrictions, I think, is going to be the next big mistake for the Prime Minister.
Oof, that was just a couple of days before she turned up at his office. In other news...
Victim, a 15-year-old boy, suffered serious injuries, and despite the best efforts of the ambulance service, he sadly died a short time later.
Is it time for metal detectors in every single school? A 15-year-old has been stabbed to death. What on earth is going on with Britain's kids? And GB Energy apparently won't hit its job target for 20 years.
Grow these companies, energy companies grow over 10, 20 years, and we're going to be around in 20 years as a British energy champion.
I mean, it's hardly a surprise, isn't it, when you see that that's the numpty who's in charge of it. And just when you thought that Hollywood celebs couldn't get any weirder... That's before Kanye West's wife turned up completely naked. I mean, can you guess what's happened next as well? When two giant hogs escaped and found their way onto a man's front lawn. All that and much more. Get ready, Britain, here we go. Can I just say, before I throw over to the bulletins there, I just found out right at the start there is some big news when it comes to Justin Trudeau and Canada. It appears that they have, in the last few minutes, caved in to Trump. They've done a Mexico, they're going to put troops at the border and all sorts. So I'm going to be filling you in on all of that a bit later on. But before that, is it time for the police to knock on the Prime Minister's door? Next.
Very good evening to you. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. The Prime Minister says his thoughts are with the family of a 15-year-old boy who died after he was stabbed at a school in Sheffield earlier. The victim was airlifted to hospital after the incident at All Saints Catholic High School just after midday, but died a short time later. South Yorkshire Police have confirmed a 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in custody. Sir Keir Starmer says his heart goes out to the family.
Terrible stabbing in Sheffield is one where I think the whole country would want to reach out to the family, to the friends, to the school, the entire community. A young boy has gone to school and hasn't returned home, and so my first thoughts as Prime Minister and as a father are with the family.
The Prime Minister was speaking in Brussels ahead of a dinner with EU leaders where he will attempt to reset relations with the bloc. Sir Keir says the UK won't be forced to choose between the US and the EU should a trade war develop after Donald Trump confirmed his plans to hit Europe with tariffs. Well, earlier the Prime Minister held talks with the NATO leader, Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General, saying he wants an ambitious security partnership with the EU. Now, his trip's been described as a tightrope act as he attempts to forge closer ties with the European Union without angering the US President. Yeah, this news just in. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, says American tariffs on his country will be paused for 30 days following a good call with Donald Trump. The US was due to start enforcing 25% tariffs from tomorrow, but Trudeau says that's been postponed after he agreed to deploy 10,000 soldiers to protect the border and increase resources to stop the flow of the drug fentanyl heading into the US from Canada. Well, it follows a similar development earlier today when Donald Trump confirmed the US will delay imposing tariffs on Mexico for a month after its president, Claudia Sheinbaum, agreed to send, you guessed it, 10,000 troops to the border to stem the flow of illegal drugs and migrants. Finally, the Chelsea striker Sam Kerr called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white during an incident in 2023, a court has heard. The Australia captain is charged with causing racially aggravated harassment to the officer after he doubted her claim of being abducted by a taxi driver. It's alleged Kerr and her partner refused to pay a cleaning charge after one of them was sick in a taxi after a night out. And while he was driving them to Twickenham Police Station, the rear window in the taxi was smashed. Once inside, Ms Kerr is alleged to have become abusive and insulting. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more just after 11 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along. This is a story that is gathering a lot of momentum and shows no signs of going away. Should Keir Starmer be investigated by the police for allegedly breaking lockdown rules? If there is a police investigation, that he should also promise to resign if he's found to have broken the rules, shouldn't he? Keir Starmer has an unbelievably thin skin, and today you can tell that the revelations that a voice coach and an actress visited him at Labour HQ on Christmas Eve when London was in Tier 4 lockdown have rattled him. He was also asked about it at a NATO summit, and he appears to be absolutely fuming.
Front. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word? Earlier today, it emerged that Leonie Mellinger, who went to coach Starmer how to respond to Boris's Brexit deal, actually turned up at Labour HQ on Christmas Eve. Shall we have a little look at what the rules were at the time? OK? In Tier 4, the stay-at-home message was put into law. As previously, there were some exemptions, including travelling for work or education, for childcare purposes and for exercise. But people should not enter or leave Tier 4 areas. And Tier 4 residents must not stay overnight or work from home. Now, this is something that's landed in the last 6 minutes on social media. I'm going to read this to you, all right? Keir Starmer's voice coach travelled between Tier 4 London on Christmas Eve 2020 before heading to Brighton, which was in Tier 3. The Tier 4 rules stated at the time that residents in Tiers 1 to 3 should not enter Tier 4. So that appears to be a flagrant breach of the rules. It appears to be a flagrant breach of the rules brought on by the now Prime Minister himself for wanting that woman in his office. OK? It also said that where people cannot work from home, they should still travel to work, for example, in the construction and manufacturing sectors, which she was not in. And the exceptions were for key workers. Well, the guidance at the time set out that the key workers belong to local and national government. This only includes those administrative occupations essential to the effective delivery of the COVID-19 response. Essential public services, such as the payment of benefits, including in government agencies and arm's-length bodies. Do you think that includes a voice coach for a really dull politician? No. It can't, can it? Because they weren't key workers, were they? No. At least not according to the government's official list of jobs, even though Keir Starmer insists that she was. Note that bit as well. Where people cannot work from home, they can travel to work. So why couldn't the voice coach and actress have just done it over Zoom? She obviously could have done. In fact, everyone else was. And you know why? Because she rather helpfully tweeted a picture of an empty train carriage, didn't she? There we go. That was on Christmas Eve. Well, there was nobody on that train, was there? Because very few people were allowed to be. There is no way she was genuinely a key worker, in my opinion. Keir Starmer has several problems here. Earlier today, his official spokesman didn't defend the scandal, but they have denied any wrongdoing took place. Instead, they just said they won't talk about things before the election. Well, it's convenient, isn't it? That makes it look like there is something to hide. Here is Keir Starmer, just a few days before that meeting with his voice coach, calling for harder, tougher, stricter lockdown measures.
Easing the restrictions, I think, is going to be the next big mistake for the Prime Minister. And he, rather than sort of saying, well, I'm not going to change the rules, it's over to you, families and communities, you take responsibility. That's not the act of a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should say, I'll take the difficult decisions, not hand them over to individuals. We can see that the tiered system isn't working in the way the Prime Minister promised. More people are going into the higher tiers, so it's not strong enough.
No, it's not working, is it? Because actually, Mr Starmer, at that time, it does appear that a washed-up actress was travelling between Tier 3 and Tier 4 to come to your office. So it does appear that maybe the COVID restrictions weren't working that well, actually. Does that sound like a man who honestly thinks it's acceptable to invite an actress round for the evening? No, it doesn't, does it? And yet he appears to have done that. Starmer spent months hammering Boris, calling for him to resign.
He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
Well, the problem now is that many people feel as though Keir Starmer was very lucky not to be at a party himself. Do you remember Beer and Korma Gate? Yeah, well, there's a bit of beer there, isn't there? And there's a bit of korma. And it's quite easy to conclude that maybe, actually, that's a party. But he promised that he'd resign if police found that he'd breached the rules. They decided that he hadn't. But what now about this voice coach? Why not promise the same thing, Sir Keir? Why don't you say, go on then, let's have the police investigate it, and if I'm found to have done anything wrong, then I'll resign. Do you know how it turns out? They probably know each other, by the way, him and this voice coach. He founded and ran an anti-death penalty charity with her husband, Anthony Burton. That's according to Guido Fawkes. I tell you what this looks like, Prime Minister. It looks like there was one rule for you and your lovey mates during COVID and one rule for everyone else. It looks like you wanted to lock us all up, ban us from seeing our grandparents, stop us from visiting dying relatives in hospital, but you could get some has-been actress at your beck and call whenever you wanted. Keir Starmer has developed a reputation with the public for not necessarily always sticking to his word, whether that's with pensioners, waspy women, farmers, securing the border, cutting your energy bills, reducing taxes, you name it. You don't remember during COVID where he clearly tried to pass off Lord Ali's £80 million penthouse as his own home?
At times like this, we must all put the national interest first and play by the rules. Of course, I understand that sticking to the rules can be inconvenient.
So do you really believe him now? Do we really believe all the rules were followed? Do we believe him when he says this?
Front. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key worker? Of course not, he says. Of course not. Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's get the police involved, Prime Minister. After all, we've had 2-tier Keir, now we've got Tier 4 Keir, haven't we? And maybe the Prime Minister should ask for his money back from that voice coach after all.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We've got journalist and broadcaster Carol Malone, we've got former Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry and trade unionist Andy Twelves. Carol, I will start with you. Should the police be knocking on our Prime Minister's door, do you think?
Of course, you know, we can't forget, you know, during this time, fathers were banned from watching their pregnant wives give birth. Kids were banned from seeing their dying mums and dads. You know, people were separated at funerals, physically separated in crematoriums and churches so they wouldn't affect anybody. And here we have our Prime Minister letting someone in to his house. You know, this makes the ordinary people of this country who made sacrifices and stuck to the rules feel stupid. And you said it before, that, you know, is one rule for the elitists in this country and one rule for the rest of us. And to imagine that even though that COVID is over now, people have forgotten the hardships of that time. People have forgotten that. They have not forgotten. It's why the hatred for Boris exists the way it does. You know, we know Matt Hancock lost his job in the end because he broke the rules. Boris lost his job because he had a bit of cake. And Starmer, who pretends he's this ethical, you know, this moral arbiter of everything, has broken the rules. That's what it very much looks like.
Let's just look at this. So in the last few minutes, the Telegraph's Dominic Penner has exclusively revealed Sir Keir Starmer's voice coach travelled between COVID tiers in December 2020, OK? On Christmas Eve, but went home later that day. So she spent the Christmas break in Brighton. At that time, you were not allowed to travel between Tier 4 and Tier 3. And it appears that she did that. And it appears that she did that because Keir Starmer asked her to. Does he not have to quit over this?
I don't think it's a resigning matter, but I think it's probably quite stupid for him to deny any wrongdoing. You know, it's the same thing as when we were discussing this 2 or 3 years ago with the Conservative government. You know, stop denying it, just say, yeah, we were in the wrong, and, you know, they could probably move on without the media.
The two things to think about that. I mean, first of all, if he does admit it, he's admitting a criminal offence.
Sure.
So he's not, you know, they've got this a bit wrong, he's admitting a criminal offence. And secondly...
You're a rule maker and a law breaker.
Correct. And secondly, he's clearly misled the House of Commons, which is what Boris was ultimately kicked out for, because he said repeatedly to the House of Commons. And let's cast our mind back, Patrick, because I think people forget far too quickly. This Christmas is the year that the government cancelled Christmas. Relatives weren't allowed to be with each other. If you lived in Tier 4 in London, you know, you couldn't see your relatives. I remember cancelling my own Christmas celebration because we couldn't come together as a family because we were in different areas. This is to think that just a few hours before grandchildren would have been opening presents with their grandchildren that was cancelled by the government. Keir Starmer was just having acting lessons because it suited him.
Why?
It's just such a slap in the face to every GB News viewer and families who made the real sacrifice. It is a disgrace.
Go on, Carol.
I was just going to say, what Downing Street said tonight was even more shocking. They said, this happened while we were in opposition. Like that matters. Breaking a law is breaking a law. And you saw on that piece of film there, when he was asked a perfectly legitimate question by a journalist, what he said was, don't be ridiculous. Of course not. I mean, how supercilious can you be? Downing Street have all admitted it because they've said it happened in opposition. So it happened in opposition.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter. Is that, if you're in opposition, is that a go-ahead to break the law? No, of course it isn't. And that's what he should be.
It's also the idea, there's no way, I don't think, Annie, that this can be classed as an essential service. She had supposedly worked with him for the last couple of years, just aside from the fact that what it literally was, but also the idea that he's supposedly employed this woman for the best part of 2.5 years. He didn't need an urge. It wasn't like, I need this first ever acting lesson, a voice coach lesson right now. She could have done it over Zoom, couldn't she?
No, I completely... And I think any reasonable Labour supporter, any reasonable Labour voter would go, yeah, no, actually, she's definitely not a key worker. They probably did... They broke the law, probably, and they should just apologise and move on. I think most reasonable people would, you know, looking at what the Tories did, you know, looking at what a lot of normal people did break COVID rules.
Yes, they did,
I think most people would go... But I think most people go...
But
if he just admitted it, most people would probably go, fair enough.
People broke COVID rules. And in fact, towards the end, and I'll just say this, I might get in trouble with this, I think you're an idiot if you didn't, because they were ridiculous. It was ridiculous, and the world had moved on. And we had this vaccine that was supposedly going to be the great white hope for the rest of society, and then it turned out, shock horror, even if you had about 4 doses, you could still get COVID, you could still pass it on.
Yeah, it's
and I think that was the point that most people... Just go back to the bloody office, will you? Yeah. But anyway, but Keir Starmer was one of the people... He
was the high priest of the new religion of COVID. And what really galls me about this is his office saying, we said she was a key worker. Well, you can't do that. It was set out in law. I voted on it in Parliament what constituted a key worker. You couldn't suddenly go, you know what, I need my nails done. I'll tell you what, today, I will designate the person who does my nails as a key worker. Yeah. It is a disgrace. And what really stinks about this is the rank hypocrisy of Keir Starmer. I've got an idea. Forget the police. Let's get Sue Gray back to investigate him. Oh, hold on. We can't. She's now a Labour member of the House of Lords. The person who swung the sword of Damocles at Boris Johnson, joined the Labour government, and then got sacked because she couldn't even hack the job.
But what does this tell you about a leader? That he has to have help, because this is what this voice coach actually said. He couldn't communicate with people. He was a bit wooden. Well, he was more than a bit wooden, and he still is. So she
should ask for his money back.
She's failed, exactly. She's failed miserably. She should take him off her CV. But what does it say about a leader, a supposed leader, that he needs to have help to communicate with people? Real leaders do that instinctively.
Lots of people do. Lots of people do.
Yes, I know Margaret Thatcher had it, but you know, she had a political conviction, and she had a very distinct ideology. So she used Laurence Olivier actually to help her bring her voice down a bit so she could be more forceful. That worked for her, but him, he's had the voice lessons and they've done no good at all. But it's as Jake said, it's the rank hypocrisy of making ordinary people at home do these things, make sacrifices, watch while their relatives are dying and not being able to hold them or touch them, and he's away doing what he likes, having acting lessons.
I mean, I agree. I think most reasonable Labour supporters would go, yeah, you've done wrong, apologise and move.
Broke the law.
But I think it is worth noting, you know, when the Tories stick out their spin, when they're briefing, when they're sending out the spokespeople, in Cammy Badenoch's first interview as leader of the opposition, as Conservative leader, she said that Partygate had been massively overblown. So I would actually go on the hypocrisy point and go, I'd struggle to take any Conservative Party briefings seriously because A, Partygate, and B, she went, it's all overblown anyway.
But how can Downing Street say they won't discuss it? How dare they say they won't discuss it? This is a legitimate concern. And if they're not discussing it, it looks like they've got something to hide.
In fairness, I don't run the Number 10 press office.
No. Yeah, not yet. But surely the real question here is, I understand all the stuff about whether he should have acting lessons during COVID and all this. The real question here is, did the person who is now Prime Minister of the United Kingdom break the law? On these facts, it appears that he may have done.
And what's the precedent there?
That you resign.
That he resigned.
That you resign.
Not the President. He said he would.
And he said he'd resign if he was convicted. And there's no limitation on the period for which you can bring a criminal offence. So civil offences, there's a 6-year limitation. But a criminal offence, if you murder someone you found 20 years later, you still get tried for it. This should be investigated by the Met. And if he's found guilty, if he has any backbone whatsoever, he'll stick by what he said previously and go.
Because the other aspect is that today at that NATO summit, we've played the clip a couple of times. You know, he says categorically, he's got very angry about even having to fend off the question. No rules were broken. So again, I'll stress that Keir Starmer's current position is that no rules were broken. Well, if it turns out, and I think most people would be scratching our heads now as to how can you say that now that we appear to know even more that she's travelled between tiers. Can I just preface this by saying a couple of things, right? I am like, I imagine most people watching or listening here, which is that I do not long for people to get knocks on the door from the police over breaking what, in my view, were utterly ridiculous COVID restrictions. But what I am saying is, I would be up for it for the bloke who was the one who was calling for everyone to be investigated for everything. Maybe you should deal with that. Keir Starmer, like I've said, denies any wrongdoing. We went to the Met Police, by the way, and we said to them, are you going to investigate? And they actually released quite a pithy statement back to us, which says, to be clear, the only way we can investigate someone is if someone reports it to the police.
So come on, Patrick, have you done it? Have you done it?
Well, I haven't done it. I haven't done it. Maybe someone
else should.
Right, OK, so moving on, we are giving you 2 chances to win our latest Great British giveaway. It's 2 amazing prizes. Here's how you can be in it to win it.
The Great British Giveaway is officially 1 year old, and we have a birthday treat for you. We're giving you not 1, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck, everybody. As we were saying just then, actually, you should stay tuned because I'm going to bring the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And it looks like the Canadians have capitulated to Trump. So it was the Mexicans, the Colombians and anyone from Panama. And now it appears that the Canadians have. That's happened in the last few minutes. I will reveal all very shortly. And what on earth is on Jaden Smith's head? Yeah, also, what's happened to Will Smith's kids, to be fair? But anyway, after the tragic news of a 15-year-old schoolboy being fatally stabbed in Sheffield, I ask, should all schools now have metal detectors? Stay tuned.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A woman of 53 has believed for 18 months she was in an online relationship with Brad Pitt.
I think we're seeing pictures. So
Now,
these are the pictures that she received that made her believe that she was in this relationship with Brad Pitt.
And you'll see that some of it is in hospital because the scammer was claiming that he was suffering from cancer. This was playing very much on her emotion. So this is a divorcee who lived in Mauritius. She'd received a £700,000 divorce settlement, or £650,000 divorce settlement, I should say, and £700,000 has been taken from her through this scam.
Yeah.
As she was becoming, every time she became suspicious, the money was taken for payment of charges on gifts that she never received, and then hospital fees. There was lots of emotions being played into there. Now, as somebody, I'm a rom-com writer by trade, so I write romantic fiction. One of the books I've written has actually been about somebody who did online dating, got herself into a whole heap of trouble. Not quite, she wasn't in a relationship with Brad Pitt, but she met somebody dodgy. So because I've written that book, I've met a lot of people who've come up to me and said, oh, it's happened to me.
It's scary in this digital age, isn't it?
They've lost $700,000, but somebody has tried it on. Somebody my question is, would a man go 18 months in a relationship online without seeing somebody and keep it going? Or is this feeding into this neediness of a particular demographic of a woman who that's better than anything else she got going on in her life, was what was being fed to her over the internet? I just
and then maybe a little bit of her knew, but she kind of just suppressed it because she
was hoping it was Brad Pitt.
Her daughter apparently for a year was saying, this can't be true, come on, think about it. But she just fell for it. But I just wonder, what's right, it's a very sad story. She's obviously now getting a lot of hate and ridicule as well.
Because she's been on French TV and she's had a huge amount of pushback from it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. On the very day a 14-year-old girl was convicted of attempted murder for stabbing 2 teachers and a student, we are hit with yet more tragic news. This time, a 15-year-old boy fatally stabbed in a Sheffield Catholic school. In just 1 year, between January and December 2023, there were 738 incidents of weapon possessions in schools. This knife epidemic has infiltrated our classrooms. It's clear that something has to change. So, should it be metal detectors? Should they be now in every single school? I'm joined now by youth worker and chair of the My Ends Project, Anthony King. Anthony, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Hey. Look, depressingly, are we in a situation where we just have to have metal detectors at every single school and college now?
I think that's the way forward. At the moment, we're trying to keep as much children safe as possible. And the challenge we're having, Patrick, at the moment
is that left, right and centre we're seeing children as young as 7 and 8 take knives into schools. So we have challenges around that, and I'm of the opinion that we will start needing to have metal detectors in schools, colleges and yes, even universities.
Do you think that enough is done by various different authorities if it turns out that an individual has been carrying a knife around school previously and then, you know, gets expelled for it or whatever it is? Do you think that should be like an automatic expulsion? Should the police ever let them return into the same school? Should the teachers ever return them to the same school? What do you think?
Well, number one, I don't believe every child is born evil, in my opinion. I believe that circumstances and environmental factors contribute to young people carrying knives to school and to colleges. I think what we have a challenge here is that once a child is excluded from school, you've got the public health approach that highlights that if they end up in a pupil referral unit, they're more likely to end up in criminality. It isn't always the way forward. We need to deal with the root of the problem, which is dealing with it from an earlier stage, dealing with it from infancy, as to why 6, 7, 8-year-olds feel that it's appropriate to carry knives, and then we go on to see a 15-year-old in Sheffield go on to stab another child today. That raises concerns for me.
Yeah, I will say to that, you know, allegedly at the moment, anyway, he's been arrested, right? But yeah, I absolutely take your point. Yeah, why has this started to happen more now? Because we've had 2 school lockdowns in 2 days. And when there'll be parents probably watching this show right now who maybe have just put their kids to bed, who'll be thinking about driving them to school or college in the morning or whatever. You don't drop your kid off at the school gates expecting to never see them again, do you? And unfortunately, that appears to be happening all too regularly now. It just seems so depressing. Has there been a cultural shift? Do you think, Anthony, knives have become more acceptable?
I believe that, you know, as you know, Patrick, I've been dealing with a situation not too long ago with a young girl that was travelling to school early in the morning, 8:30 in the morning, and sad life. And her life was taken due to knife crime. So I understand that parents, parents, when we send our children to school, we have an expectation that they return home safely. But I think the schools need to do a lot more. I've spoken to a few teachers this evening as well, who have said, look, we're not security guard, we're not the police. And they've gone on to say, we're not qualified security, we're not SIA registered, we're there to teach. We're not even social workers. But teachers are facing major problems at the moment because children are presented with more challenging issues than before. We do need to start employing security in schools now. We do need to start having metal. We need to do whatever it takes to keep children and young people safe in education.
Yeah, and think of the teachers as well. I mean, look, to be fair, the teachers, you don't go into teaching to think you're going to have to take a knife off someone. So, you know, it's everyone. It's the kids, it's the teachers, it's anyone who's at the school. It's a big problem. And, yeah, I think, depressingly, we've got to get to a stage where it's metal detectors, it's security, it's having a police officer in schools. Because I don't see what the solution is otherwise. It's going to take longer to deal with cultural issues or familial issues than it is to just try to stop that. But, Anthony, can I just say a massive thank you to you for making time for us this evening. It's always an absolute pleasure. And you take care, mate. All right. All the best. God bless. Bye-bye. Anthony King there, who's the youth worker and chair of the My Ends Project. Right, coming up, what on earth is going on here? I mean, I want to know who let the hogs out, but wait till you see what they did to that poor bloke's front garden. Look at that. Absolutely ridiculous. Next, though, I'm going to bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And since we've been on air, Canada has become the latest country to cave in to Trump. Stay tuned.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, there's plenty of fine weather around as higher pressure becomes established but unsettled in parts of Greece. So across the Canaries, largely dry on Tuesday. Across Gibraltar, perhaps just seeing some spells of rain or showers. Largely dry across parts of Italy as well with sunshine, but across Greece, we have got an area of low pressure, bringing some showers, perhaps quite heavy at times. But looking ahead across Wednesday and Thursday, plenty of settled weather and feeling pleasant too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night. Quite murky across the southeast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle is possible. And generally a bit milder than last night. Could dip down to the low single digits with some clearer skies in the east, but many places will start Tuesday quite a bit above freezing. But we will start with rain across central Scotland, West Wales. Much of England, though, will still be dry at this stage. It's quite grey and murky across East Anglia and the southeast. There's that rain, a soggy start for a good part of Wales. Northwest England, southern Scotland, the rain edging away from Glasgow through the morning rush hour. In fact, much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
OK, welcome back. Let's reveal at least some of tomorrow's newspaper front pages now. We start with the Metro. Dangerous fool who put lives at risk. This is Daniel Khalif. He, of course, broke out of Wandsworth prison and was spying for Iran. He's been sentenced to 14 years. The Daily Express, 15-year-old boy knifed to death in school attack. A boy, was knifed to death. It's the second time in 2 days a school has gone into lockdown. It comes just days after a 14-year-old girl was found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder, I believe it was as well. Absolutely astonishing what's taking place in schools now. Let's go to the Times. NHS withholds Nottingham report to protect killers' privacy. The NHS has refused to publish in full a report exposing failings in the treatment of a paranoid schizophrenic who killed 3 people in Nottingham because of patient confidentiality. That, of course, is Valdo Calacane. Yeah, I mean, another ridiculous story where we appear to be putting the rights of the perpetrator above the rights of the victims' families. PM won't back EU in trade war, they say. Starmer refuses to criticise Trump plan for 10% tariffs on the bloc. So there we go. And the Daily Telegraph here. Rayner to set rules on Islam and free speech. Tory Remainer-in-Chief lined up to advise on redefining Muslim discrimination. I'll just give you a bit of the detail on this. Angela Rayner is planning to create a council on Islamophobia and is lining up a former Tory minister to lead it. So Dominic Grieve is apparently going to be the one who's going to be saying he is, for what it's worth, an arch Remainer. He's led the Citizens UK Commission on Islam, which aimed to promote dialogue between Muslim and non-Muslim communities. He wrote a foreword to a controversial all-party parliamentary group's report in 2018, set out a definition of Islamophobia that was subsequently adopted by the Labour Party. The other story they've gone for is a picture story, which is that an ex-Tory chief joins the Ukraine front line. It's Jack Lepresti. He is Andrea Jenkins' ex-husband, and she has released a statement on Twitter or X this evening saying that neither her or their child Clifford were made aware that he was going to be fighting on the front line. She does, however, wish him a safe return. So there we go. Some breaking news tonight, though. Canada has done a Mexico and pledged to send 10,000 personnel down to the border with the US to guard it. In return, Donald Trump has agreed to pause tariffs on Canada for 30 days. In a statement, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada is implementing a £1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with our American partners. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working to protect the border. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days whilst we work together. Jay, we were talking about this before, weren't we? Canada has now... So it's Canada, it's Mexico, it's Panama, it's Colombia. I mean, Trump's on fire.
EU may follow. I think maybe President Trump should say you should send troops to the English Channel to defend the British border, and then we might support it.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, Carol, what do you make of this? I mean, he's just picking them off, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think his threats are working in the sense that because the world is scared of him, they know he's unpredictable. They know he may or may not impose tariffs. He's threatened other things in the past, and he's threatened to nuke countries that threaten America. And I think the world is so scared of him, they don't know quite what he might do. And I think all these countries who've caved in, that's exactly how they think. I mean, if our Prime Minister made that sort of threat, no one would take any notice because they know he wouldn't have the guts to do it. But they know Trump has, and it's working. He's not had to do anything to get exactly what he wants. He's just had to threaten, which is smart.
I mean, it's working, isn't it?
It is completely.
Yeah, I mean, but really, it's not sustainable long term because tariffs do hurt. If he was to put tariffs on imports, it would hurt the American people primarily. Because it would hurt Canadian businesses or Mexican businesses, but they just pass the cost on to the consumer, like when we tax cigarette companies, it passes on to the consumer. So realistically, I think it is. Jake was making a good point. What's the precedent that it sets? Because what if China starts doing this or India starts doing this?
They won't.
China might. So as of tomorrow, he is putting sanctions in place on China. I think it's a 10%. I think it is tariff on all Chinese goods. It might be more actually. But the thing is that apart from the China ones, he's not actually had to impose any tariffs.
No.
And compare this to Kamala Harris. There's a reason that the Americans didn't vote for Kamala Harris is because she was in charge of the border. The Democrats told the American people, look, there's nothing we can do about this. We can't stop this flow of migrants. Trump's come in, boom. He has solved, in many ways, the greatest issue facing America.
He hasn't solved it. He hasn't solved it.
You just have not got to be afraid of what other countries say or think about you. You just have to get on with it. And when you put America first, that's what you do.
The US-Mexico border's, 2,000 miles long, just a bit short of that. 10,000 soldiers, in the big scheme of things, is actually not that much.
10,000 who weren't there the day before yesterday, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe if we could do something maybe if we could do that on the English Channel, the British people would be supporting us.
I do think this story ties in, actually, because the other breaking news this evening is that Reform UK have taken the lead for the first time in a new opinion poll by YouGov. There were two polls last week. This is... I think, it's a massive... It was YouGov, isn't it? It rings bells with a lot of people. The polling firm says that if a general election were held tomorrow, 25% of British voters would choose Reform, 24% would choose Labour. Now, obviously, because we have the voting system that we have in Britain at the moment and the way that our 650 constituencies are born out, that does not necessarily mean that Reform UK would get an actual majority in the House of Commons. But in terms of the popular vote, that's where they are, and it's the third poll in a row. And I do think it's because they want to do stuff like what Trump is doing, and people quite like that.
Reform have their finger on the pulse of the British people. They know what disturbs them. They know what the British people need. This Labour Party, we would have thought know what working people need, ordinary people need, but they clearly don't. And Reform does. And I think you're right. And I think, the way things stand, they couldn't get in, even if there was an election tomorrow. However, give it another 2 years of this kind of carnage, I think they'll easily walk in 2 years, 3 years.
Well, what do you make of it? Because, I mean, the other aspect to it was a story that we were talking about a little bit earlier on, which is supposedly the Tories are going a bit skint, and that's because a lot of people are now donating to Reform instead.
I mean, 4.5 years, obviously, we don't have an election for 4.5 years. It's a long time. And I think the Labour Party would be stupid if they didn't take this seriously. Morgan McSweeney, Chief of Staff in Number 10, but he was also the campaign director. He's got Dominic Cummings' love of focus groups, so he'll know what people are thinking of Reform. He'll know where Reform are really, getting things right. And I think Morgan McSweeney's got the kind of campaign instinct, if nothing else, to go, this is...
I wonder if he knows what people are actually thinking of Keir Starmer. We might get a better government.
Sure he does.
If they listen to that, we might get a better government. This is really interesting. Actually, I'd like to link it back to the story of Dominic Grieve, Remainer-in-Chief, going in to redefine Islamophobia for Angela Rayner. What we're seeing is a new reality in British politics. That actually, regardless of old alliances, we effectively have the political class, or whatever you want to call it, splitting in the sort of the establishment, which is going with parties like Labour and former Tory MPs just happily saying, I'm going to be involved in the government. You've got David Gork advising on pensions, and then everyone else who sort of wants change. And why I think this spells big trouble for Kemi and my party, the Conservative Party, is traditionally after an election, what happens is, you know, an opposition wins, they do really well, they have the honeymoon period, everyone focuses on them. This is different this time. Labour have come in, they've been a disaster, they've been an unmitigated disaster. People look at them and say, right, they're terrible. They look back at the Conservatives and say, well, we remember what you were like, you were terrible, and now they're saying there's a clean skin here, it's reform, they've got no track record to defend, they just come in and whatever the problem is, they say, look, it would have been different if we were in charge. Now, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have not worked out how to deal with this new reality, and this is why I think two of the major parties are seeing the electorate slip away and go to reform.
How can Labour and Starmer and the people at the top of that party not see the media every day and not see the stuff that really is affecting people, the things people are getting anxious and angry about? How come they don't see that? We all see it. How come they don't see it?
Well, look,
Robert... No immigration is the number one.
What I will say is Robert Jenrick's piped up on this just quickly before I throw to the break. The government should drop its plans for such a deeply flawed definition of Islamophobia. We should tackle anti-Muslim hate wherever it occurs, but this definition is a Trojan horse for a blasphemy law protecting Islam.
Completely.
Why do Labour MPs think it is acceptable to mock Christianity but not Islam? Time and again, the Labour government displays an Orwellian disregard for freedom of speech. That is Robert Jenrick there. I get the impression from that he's not particularly happy that Remainer-in-Chief Dominic Grieve is working with the Labour Party to get this.
But most of the country will think what he thinks as well about that.
But Robert Jenrick, whose government stewarded some of the most Orwellian protest laws in modern history.
But you can't have a law that says...
That's quite hypocritical.
Well, they didn't enforce it then, did they? Because we've had pro-Palestine.
But I mean, he did put them in. He did put them in, did he not?
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, look, hey, we'll see what happens, But that front of the Daily Telegraph there, Rayner to set rules on Islam and free speech, I just think is pretty tone deaf.
Chilling.
Yes.
Pretty
tone deaf at the minute. But anyway, coming up, I'll bring you the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages and just take a look at this bizarre spectacle.
Guys, your left, please.
You just wonder what goes on in Hollywood, don't you, really? Because that's weird. Anyway, stay tuned to find out a little bit more. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Lisa, you got in touch with me and you flagged this survey because you were concerned as a parent that your child had been given this to fill out.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter came home from school, she was very confused. She was asking why somebody would want to hurt themselves if they were feeling sad or worried about something. So that led to a conversation that we had, and I actually phoned the school and asked them to send me the survey, which with a lot of pushing, they eventually did send me the survey. And when I read through it, I was just completely shocked at the content. The survey says when I'm feeling worried that maybe I should try cutting or harming myself, because it's in the survey, so that must be an option. I've tried everything else, so why not try this?
It is astonishing that some of these are young children who are perhaps being introduced to these, these abuses for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of 17 different types of drugs, some of which I've actually never heard of myself. I mean, the wording on here is, have you ever got high from taking drugs? I mean...
And we know that some of these behaviours, self-harm, gender dysphoria, taking drugs, are psychologically contagious. Children do them because they see other children do them, or they find out about them from the internet or from surveys like this. So the idea that this is just information gathering and won't go any further than that is ridiculous. There was a similar survey in Scotland, I think, about 3 years ago, where children the same age, 11, 12, 13, were asked about their sex lives. How many times have you had sex in the last year? idea. How did you have sex? Did you use contraception? Totally normalising underage sex. So the idea that children are just mini adults and we can confront them with all the same kind of ideas and dilemmas that adults have to face is just ridiculous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I'm going to round you off with the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, starting this time with the Eye. UK cabinet tensions on Brexit migration deal for under 30s as Germany makes a new plea to Starmer. So there's more detail on this striking new deal with the EU on youth mobility is now subject to a heated debate in cabinet. Will we cave in? Will we have more migration for EU under 30s? Will that mean us giving away some of our fishing rights? We'll have to wait and see.
Also, Rashford's gone to Villa.
The Independent, Starmer to walk Trump tightrope in US trade war. The PM insists the UK isn't choosing between Europe and America. The Daily Mail, what a time to be crawling back to the EU as Trump threatens trade war with the EU but hints at sparing the UK. Starmer begs Brussels for closer ties at a palace banquet. The Guardian, Starmer faces Labour revolt over backing for oil field. Keir Starmer is facing a growing internal backlash over the potential approval of a giant new oil field. After Treasury sources indicated Rachel Reeves was likely to back the idea. I don't know how much longer Ed Miliband can realistically stay in post.
He's not having that good a week, Keir, is he? It's not.
It's only months.
But every headline's slightly different and everyone's critical. It's wherever he turns, he's got problems.
Yeah. The Independent is not too critical today.
But it's all of his own
reasonably
making.
objective.
This is the stupidity. He did it all.
No, there we go. I mean, a lot of... Well, look, he's on all the front covers, so if you take the philosophy that any news is good news, then, there is that, isn't there? But...
I mean, under the Tories, Rashford was still at United, so,
Will you still?
Under Labour...
Are you a Villa fan?
United.
You can't.
Oh, you're right, OK, fine.
Doesn't even support the best football team in Manchester.
Well, OK, but he also supports
How
the
many
same one as me,
charges? How many charges?
No, OK.
Allegedly, it's alleged.
All right, no, look, we are used to seeing some, frankly, very weird outfits on the red carpets of award ceremonies, aren't we? Lady Gaga's meat dress, Bjork, draped in a swan. Well, tonight I'm giving out my own awards for the most ridiculous outfits at last night's Grammys. My runner-up this evening is whatever Jaden Smith, some of Will and Jaden, spelled slightly differently, if you didn't know, has on his head.
Hey, guys, to your left, please.
That's the point.
What is that?
That's to get your picture on every media outlet in the world, and that's what's...
But it looked homemade. It looked like he come out of primary school.
But they all looked silly. All the outfits were ridiculous.
Willow Smith, his sister next to him, she looks really great, and I think...
Yeah, but you'd be good if you were her as well, wouldn't you? She's turned up in lingerie, right, and her brother's rocks up with a house on his head. You think, what's gone wrong with...
Well, it's a cardboard... It was a cardboard box. A cardboard box dressed up like a fairy castle.
It's mad. It's mad. But first place goes to the Australian model and wife of Kanye West, Bianca Censori. And I am wondering what we've had to censori out of this. But anyway, it turns out all of it. Right, well, she is... Oh, that was it, was it? That's a shame. I know. She was basically wearing absolutely nothing. Now, she did have some... Well, it was see-through, but it was like a dress thing.
So basically, is this like the real-life version of the Emperor's New Clothes?
Yeah.
Do you know what's sad about that? I think that is her under his control.
Well,
I think that's her being manipulated. And it's a bit sad in a way. You know, she married someone who's very famous and she clearly wants to be famous. But what a fool she made of herself. And he's standing there like the idiot he is, letting her... No man would want his wife to do that. No man who really loved his wife would want her to do that. It's just... I feel sorry for her. I think she's under his control. It's very sad.
I mean, he might deny that. I don't know.
Well,
I'm sure he would.
I'm sure he would.
But, I mean, I thought she looked pretty good.
Oh, you're being ridiculous tonight. No, she did not look pretty good. It was humiliating. But
I think for a younger man in his 20s, I think.
All right, OK.
Pretty good.
Well, look, just quickly, we've got time for this. Now, when you escape to the countryside, you picture serene walks, rolling hills, cosy country pubs. But one bloke got this. Pigs turned up in his garden and turned his entire lawn into a mud bath. Residents of Galveston in Norfolk say that the hogs have repeatedly got loose to root around their property. They think the local farmer should pay the damage. Well, I'm inclined to think that maybe he should, because they have knackered that lawn.
So what I'd say about that was that the real damaged one was the Gloucester Old Spot, and I had some Gloucester Old Spot last night. It was absolutely beautiful. So what the residents should be saying is bacon, sausages, black pudding, that should be the compensation.
All right, well, look, coming up next is Headliners. Josh, what have you got on your wonderful show, please, mate?
We have got the latest on the Trump tariffs, and we, of course, have the latest on Keir Starmer, what his response is to the potential lockdown breaking. But the big story is Angela Rayner has set up a council on Islamophobia that could lead to blasphemy laws. It's an absolutely huge story.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you go at that hell for leather. So make sure that you keep it GB News, keep it Headliners. He's right, that is a massive story. So big, I'll probably be leading on it tomorrow. But before all of that, it's your weather with Alex. Stay tuned.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night. Quite murky across the southeast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle is possible. And generally a bit milder than last night. Could dip down to the low single digits with some clearer skies in the east, but many places will start Tuesday quite a bit above freezing. But we will start with rain across central Scotland, West Wales. Much of England, though, will still be dry at this stage. It's quite grey and murky across East Anglia and the southeast. There's that rain, a soggy start for a good part of Wales. Northwest England, southern Scotland, the rain edging away from Glasgow through the morning rush hour. In fact, much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, and eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 632